Mark makes an excellent point about how the Florentine elites didn't initially know that they would be better off under election than lottery. It's something that they had to learn. It's very similar to, I think, the case in England when in the 19th century, where there's this fear of granting the suffrage to the working class. And Bagehot basically had to write to say, don't worry, they're naturally differential. They'll vote for you guys, don't worry. And it took the Florentine elites, just as it took the British elites, a little while to figure out that this system actually works in our favor. It was Guicciardini who was the only one wise enough to say early on that elections probably will favor us, the Automati, over the Popolo in Florence. I think that's a very good point. I think Mark's point about Machiavelli, about Florence's popular movements being led by Automati is less of a problem for Machiavelli than it appears. Machiavelli doesn't care if the people are led by Automati, so long as they're legitimate class traders. His exemplars, to use Michel's words, are always class traders. Brutus, in particular, is a great example of a class trader, and Valori was a disappointing, or at least unsuccessful, class trader, but certainly Machiavelli's account of his friend and patron Piero Soderini shows that he thinks that Soderini didn't go all the way in being a class trader and crushing the Florentine Automati in his support of the Great Council, in his support of the Florentine commoners. So Agathocles, in Machiavelli's account, the self-made popular tyrant who rises from low birth is really the exception that proves the rule, I think, in Machiavelli's accounts. So getting to Jack's account, you're not just here because you said nice things about my paper in Frankfurt. You're here for the second reason you noticed. You are James Madison's alter ego. And so if there is someone who is abused in the book as Machiavelli's foil, it is in fact James Madison, and as Jack explains, the mature Madison, the later Madison, was much less anti-democratic than was the young Madison who wrote the Federalist Papers, which I should say, in Madison's defense, was written for a very conservative New York audience, right? New York was one of the most conservative states that had to be convinced to join the new Constitution. So one might say, in the same way that I filter Machiavelli's message and arguments through the eyes of his conservative dedicatees in the discourses, we could say maybe Madison was trumping up his distrust of the people in the Federalist Papers, given the very conservative, very anti-democratic audience for which it was written. So I'm willing to put that, to grant him that. However, the other defenses of Madison that Jack invokes, the idea that Madison was writing for a large republic, not a small city-state, I think doesn't characterize the nature of Madison's argument for elections. For Madison, election is not a solution to the problem of size. Size is a solution to the problems of popular government. Size gives us the excuse to have elections so that we can promote representation, so we don't have to have popular inclusion. But if you thought about it analytically, there's no reason why lottery or sortition can't be used in large-scale republics. Use them in small localities, and then those who are elected by, appointed by lottery in those four are then moved up into higher bodies. There's no reason that lottery is incompatible with large territorial scale. So I think that election is there not just because of size; it's there because of qualitative political preference for an elite agenda. Similarly, with deliberation, Madison wants deliberation among the few, and he wants the people excluded from government. As he says, the great attribute of our constitutional model is the total exclusion of the people from the bodies of government. But there's no reason why deliberation can't work in large-scale republics as well. You can have town hall meetings where magistrates are then charged by with binding legislation to enact the decisions made by the people discussing in their localities. But we don't the founders also rejected imperative mandate, where representatives had to actually enact what they were charged to do by the people who elected them. So this is another way that, you know, it's somewhat disingenuous to say deliberation can only be conducted by the elite or by the few, as Madison liked it to be. There are ways to kind of filter at least deliberation at a lower level into upper levels that I think Madison was somewhat disingenuous about. As much as I appreciate Madison, not the writer of the Federalist Papers and the architect of the American Constitution, but Madison, the founder of the Democratic Republican Party, and among other views that he came to later in his life. So I thank you, Jack, and I thank Mark and Michelle.
Okay, and we can open it up. Members of the audience, questions to any of the panelists? They're very agreeable, more than willing to respond. So I'm hoping someone has a question. Let me start. I have a question, and this is to John and any other member of the panelists. One of the key terms in your wonderful book is wealthy and various cognates. And I was just wondering what it actually meant in a concrete way, both in Machiavelli, if there are gradations of wealth, and what it meant in terms of, let's say, Florentine society. The reason I say that is obviously, I mean, from all the studies that have been published, there is really no a kind of polarity where you have wealth and poverty. Clearly there's a spectrum, a continuum. And I think what a lot of studies show also is that, not just in terms of varieties of wealth, but that the very wealthy in Florence over and over again became targets of political regimes. I could give you many of them whose wealth was confiscated, whose property was confiscated. So it wasn't just a question of exile. I mean, you lost your property. And that one of the strategies of political and social life in Florence was to mask your wealth in various ways. So I was just wondering, when I read that's one question I have, just in terms of a key term. And a book like Herlihy and Klapisch's great work on